Jordan Belfort here, the Wolf of Wall Street in the Wolf's Den. I have an incredible podcast today, a really interesting would probably be an understatement, but an important guest. I'm sure by now, unless you've been living under a rock and keeping your head in the sand, you've heard of the movie The Sound of Freedom, which is about child trafficking. And it's an incredibly pervasive problem around the world with children as young as 5 years old or even younger probably being ripped from their families, some being sold by their very families into slavery, and then trafficked for sex and things that you really, it's hard to even wrap your head around. There's people evil enough or despicable enough to do this. But the movie, which was very controversial in the U.S. for reasons that, I never quite understood. Now I do, and we'll explain why in the podcast, was a huge hit here in the United States, grossing over so far $170 million on a $14.5 million budget, which is a massive hit, about to be released around the world. The person on this podcast is someone that you might not have heard from yet because he's the guy that actually financed the whole thing. He's the guy that played the pivotal character that puts up the money for the sting operation in the movie. His name is Paul Hutchinson. His background is Wall Street, very successful, very wealthy hedge fund manager who got fed up and somehow, was made aware of what was going on with child trafficking through some political connections he had, and he ended up diving into this world and dedicating the rest of his life to freeing children, rescuing children, and trying to stop this incredible, disgusting cycle of abuse that's taking place right now as we speak. So everybody, I want you to tune in right now and listen very closely to Paul Hutchinson. He's an awesome dude, and just, hang on to your seat. All right. So Paul, great to see you again. It's been about, I think, it was like 4 years, maybe since we met the first time, which was in Miami at Art Basel, right? And I recall you telling me that you had this movie that you were in the process of making about some of the things that you do in your life. And you didn't tell me the name. And lo and behold, that little movie you made turned out to be a huge box office success. And more important, I think it also brought to light a massive issue that everyone is sort of like a bit shocked over. And I watched it last night, just, so I'm a bit shocked still, trying to make sense of it. So movie, of course, is The Sound of Freedom. So congratulations on the success there.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Yeah, in fact, when we met, we had just barely finished. We finished it 5 years ago. It took 5 years to get this out to the market after we were completed.
Well, and why was that exactly? What was the holdup there? I mean, other than that, I was trying to think that through. And, the thing with the press is and the online, you read so much, and you don't know what's true, what's not true. And, so what actually caused the holdup? Was it the studio's reluctant to share a film they thought would be sort of leave the audience feeling, not uplifted, or is it a message that,
there's plenty of movies,
or is it a message they don't want out there? In other words, that for whatever reason.
I didn't know at the time, Jordan. I was like, you know what? Am I the only person that thinks this is a good film? Right? Because I'm an investor, I'm the primary investor in it. I mean, what? And I was in it. Why was there so much pushback? And I have to go back to even before we made the film. We had this story. We had just finished the largest child rescue mission in history that I knew of at the time. Over 120 victims in one day in Colombia. It was an amazing, amazing story. And then we had some other rescue missions that we wanted to put in together in this film. And we went into Sony, we went into Lionsgate, Paramount with the story. And there was some interest, but they wanted full control. They wanted to be able to change anything they wanted. They could have put me and one of the children in where I'm touching a child in the middle, some horrible thing, right? Or one of my operators doing something. So we're like, no, or they could have tabled it for 20 years and never done anything with it. So we're like, you know what? The only way that we're going to get this done right is we have to do it ourselves. And so, I've had a blessed background. I was, super successful real estate investment fund, et cetera. And so I'm like, you know what? I've donated plenty to charity. I'm going to just consider this my charity investment, right? This is a make a difference investment in the world type thing. If it does well, great. If it doesn't, at least I tried to do something that would create awareness. And so I put the primary money in, developed the entire script just on my own, and then brought in some other investors, some big families. And once we made the film, then it got tied up in so many ways. We had Fox International that was part of the capital stack in the beginning. Disney bought them. Disney said, you know what, we don't want to have anything to do with this film. We're not going to do distribution, because Fox was going to take care of that. So we're like, crap, what do we do? So that tied it up for a while. And then we had multiple distribution partners that looked at it, said, yeah, we're excited. And then when they took it to their higher ups, everybody's like, nope, nope, nope. And I thought that they just had a better read on the market than we did. And they're like, you know what, that's not going to fly. But we were wrong. But here's what I believe. Now that it's come out, and now that we've seen the massive pushback from the same guys that were denying us before, now it's not about them not thinking that it's not going to be accepted. They are seeing it, that it's being accepted. It's going against their narrative, Jordan. I really believe that's what it is. There's all kinds of crap that's being funneled through big media and big Hollywood and whatnot that we have no ability to filter. But now they're going to be able to filter what's coming into our homes. So
what narrative does it go against? I can't imagine. Like, one of the things that occurred to me while I was watching it was that, you have to be a pretty sick and twisted individual to be involved in that type of fetish, where it's, for you little boys and girls. Listen, I'm all into sexual fetishes, everything for consenting adults. Nothing wrong with that, right? Whatever it is, God bless you all, right? And I don't think it even goes against any narrative of LBGTQ plus, whatever the fuck it is, right? But like, those of consenting adults, but like, what could they possibly be thinking what narrative does this go against? That children should be exploited and trafficked? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't either. But here's the thing, Jordan. It's not as rare as people think. You watch the film, and yes, the things on the film are rare. It's a rare thing that a child gets taken from a nice family and taken to another country in a container ship. All this, I mean, that's super rare. It does happen. In fact, on those rescue missions, we identified children that had happened to. But the reality of it is, the majority of children that are being trafficked are coming from broken homes, runaways, a broken foster program. If it is a healthy family, it's a child that has super low self-esteem that's being groomed by her uncle or a babysitter, or in some cases, it's even the parents that are involved. And it's more often than somebody would think that is happening. And so the problem with trafficking as a whole is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't know that it's even happening. There's more today, and I'm not talking about just children being sexually abused at home, which is a massive number. I'm talking sold human beings. There's more today than all 300 years of
both
the transatlantic slave
underage
trade.
and women and men in there.
Yeah, exactly. All trafficking as a whole, there's more today than all 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade put together. And so we have to look at that and say, okay, in what world are we stepping back with a blind eye against trafficking as a whole? And what does trafficking look like, right? In fact, here's a surprising fact right here. Most guys thinking that consenting adults in let's say it's prostitution, right? And let's say it's illegal prostitution, but hey, you know what? We're in Miami, we're in Salt Lake, whatever else, and she's an adult, right? She's 22, she's 25 years old. She tells me she's independent, right? We started working with some of these girls that we helped pull out of hell, the numbers are staggering. Upwards of 80 or 90% of the ones that say they're independent are actually being trafficked. Now, I'm talking 20, 25-year-old, 27-year-old girls, right? Being trapped. And you're asking, well, how the hell are they trafficked at 27? It's through manipulation and fear and drug addiction, et cetera. They're saying, you know what? I know where your sister lives. I know where your mother lives. You tell anybody about what's going on with this arrangement, and they're going to be off. And so there's so much of that going on. We brought on this girl. She was 12 years old when she was taken from Mexico. She was trafficked in New York from the time she was 13 until she was 17. We were able to get her out. Actually, she ran away at 17. They caught her, beat her up, brought her back into it. At 18, finally, we were able to get her out of there. She stayed at our house over Christmas. She was there for a couple of weeks. And I was asking her, I said, Delia, tell me this. The percentage of the girls who say they're independent, the ones that are on the street, the ones that are on Backpage, the ones that are on erotic.com, whatever, I would assume that maybe half of them are trafficked. And she goes, oh no. She said, I've been in this business for a long time. She said, I believe it's over 90 to 95% of them are trafficked. So that goes back to the question, okay, I agree with you. You know, a lot of don't tell my parents this unless they're watching. Hey, mom, dad, I don't have a problem with consenting adults doing whatever they do. You know, somebody wants to go to Reno, Nevada and go to the bunny bar, whatever. I don't care. I really don't care.
Whatever.
There's no judgment there. However, if anybody is being controlled or trafficked, then I have a problem.
Well, I mean, but the movie focuses in on this very specific subset of that, which is just the most heinous, disgusting thing in the world. So how large of a problem is that? I think, is it a problem that it has existed always and it's just now coming to light, or is it getting worse? Is it really getting worse?
It is getting worse, and it's estimated somewhere between 6 million and 10 million children in the world are being trafficked. Average age of 12 years old when they get brought into trafficking. And the number is getting worse. Like 10 years ago, when I went on my first undercover rescue mission, now I've led or been involved with or had to play a key role. Most of them I've led over 70 undercover rescue missions in 15 countries over the last 10 years. I've been in the pit of hell. I was completely, in fact, when I met you, I was still undercover. There was no social media. I wasn't on any podcast, nothing until about 4 months ago. And back at the time when in the movie, this little girl, they called her Princess. They named her Rocio in the movie. They actually named her after my wife. You met my wife at the time. I'm divorced, but you met her at that same, event. So they named her, actually, no, sorry. I've had too many wives, damn it. I was actually with my next one after that. My help. Anyway, but we named her Rocio after my wife at the time, and she was actually there on the island. That little girl that we were after was there. She was standing in front of me crying. She was 11 years old, George. She was 11, being sold to me as a virgin for the first time, scared to death. There was 54 kids that were there that they brought. They brought out these 4 virgins. She was shaking. And I made a commitment to myself, to my maker, and to that child at that moment that I would do everything in my power to eradicate that from the face of me. There was nothing more evil that I could think of than a child being sold to a stranger at 11 years old. It was nothing more evil. And I realized over the last 10 years that the numbers have gotten bigger. And I thought, you know what, Paul, if your goal is to eradicate child trafficking, you're not doing a very good job, right? And so I had to take a step back and say, okay, where really is the problem? And where's the solution? Is the solution just sending a bunch of Navy SEALs down to go pull out a bunch of kids and rescue these kids? Is that the solution? It's not fixing it, because every time we pulled 20 kids out of hell, if there was still a demand, then 20 more would get sucked into this horrible situation. So I step back and I'm like, okay, where is this demand? How does somebody get to that point, right? Where they think that that's okay.
So you said that it's an exception where a loving father, and they only show the father in the movie, but where will accidentally leave his kids somewhere and the kids get taken, right? That's sort of the exception to the rule. Mostly it comes from broken homes or foster program. So is that really what's happening? Like you have all these sort of like these children that are like in lost, broken families in is it mostly Latin America? Where are they coming from? Is it
from
Asia?
All over. It's from everywhere. And I'll tell you this, I'm not going to throw light on my political background, but the border wall should have never been a political issue. It's a human trafficking issue, right? It really is. There are tens of thousands of undocumented children that we have no idea where they are, and it's an issue. I mean, literally, you could have a trafficker coming in from Colombia, bringing an abducted child, bring her across. She comes across in droves with everybody else across the border. She has a sponsor phone number. This sponsor phone number could be another pedophile or trafficker here in the U.S. There's not enough resources being put into figuring out where these kids are going. So that's an issue, absolutely. And there are a lot of kids that are coming in from other countries, but even here in the U.S., there's somewhere around 300,000 to 400,000 children in the U.S. that are being trafficked right now.
So, who are they? Who are the traffickers? What's the profile of a trafficker? Is it just some soulless opportunist that just doesn't give a shit? Is like, or is it someone that's a pedophile themselves typically, or
Well, it's an interesting point. So you saw in the movie, one of the, and those guys really existed. So I get this phone call, here's the real life thing, and this will kind of tie this all in. I get a phone call from the Attorney General, ties me in with this Homeland Security agent who needed some money to help fund this project, but knew that I had the background that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. And he's like, if I can get Pablo to help come on board, we can make this thing work. Well, I'm Pablo, I'm a wealthy, well-spoken, well-heeled, businessman who, and I fly down there, and my first meeting, I'm sitting at this table, and there's this female trafficker. She's in her early 20s, and she has a fake modeling agency, and she's making bank off of luring these kids in and selling them for sex to Americans. Then there's another guy. This guy, his name was Eduardo. I don't say that very often because Eduardo Verástegui actually plays me in the movie, but Eduardo was the name of the trafficker who had a piece of property that he inherited from his family that he wanted to develop into a child brothel sex hotel. Eduardo was a businessman, right? Eduardo had a 3-year-old of his own. When I was there in that first meeting, I exchanged contact information with him and a couple of the others. For the next 2 weeks, while we were setting up the sting, he was texting me back and forth. And he actually said things like, hey, I think that God brought, because I was committing like $8 million to develop this hotel resort thing that he wanted to put together. And he was going to bring together all of these children to prove to me that he could actually build it out, right? And so he's texting me back and forth, and he's like, I think that, and he sends me a picture of him smiling with his 3-year-old daughter in his backseat. Now, this guy he had 14 children that he was selling of his own, and he had connections with a bunch of others, right? And he sends me this text, and he goes, I think that God sent you to me because I have this family, and I need to, buy him Ferraris and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm thinking in my mind, you're right, God did send me to you, right? Because I'm going to make sure that 3-year-old doesn't grow up to get trafficked by her dad, because a lot of these traffickers end up, when their kids are old enough, start trafficking their own kids. So for them, a lot of them, it's about the money. And a lot of them were raped as a child. They were trafficked as a child. And to them, that's just kind of their business. And hey, there's money there. In fact, there's a city in Mexico, Tenancingo, 1 out of every 10 people in that little town are involved in trafficking. The children grow up thinking that's what they want to be. They want to be a pimp. They want to be that's just how it is. So there are places that believe that that's okay, which is, that's their prerogative as long as it's a freaking adult and they're consenting. But if you're owning somebody and controlling somebody, it's not okay, period.
Is there a reason why like the Navy SEALs don't go into a town like that and just blow it up, basically? I mean, like, or cut all the dicks off the men. I mean, they deserve to have their dicks and balls cut off for sure. So like, I don't understand what is there no political will? Is there some like, so like, okay, so I think part of the pushback that you get from this movie is that somehow it got aligned with like QAnon Trump stuff. Like it is this weird narrative, right? Which I just never took seriously, right? Because it's a movie on child trafficking, right? But that somehow like that there's the perception that there's this cult of people on the left that, drink children's blood and like adrenochrome and all this insane shit. And they're covering for these people because they're part of it. And the underlying problem of all the world is pedophilia. Like what's the rap? It's all nonsense.
Yeah, that's crap. It's absolute crap. This should never be a political issue. Yet, they put me on a bunch of right-wing podcasts, and I told them, listen, I'm done with those. I need to be on the left-wing podcast because we need to use this as a uniting thing. This is not political. We've arrested just as many right-wing pedophiles as we have left-wing pedophiles.
One would think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no. In fact, I'm just gonna say it right here. I'm gonna piss everybody off. You ready? I believe it's a higher number on the right. Here's why. Because when you've got statistically, you got a whole bunch of money and you've got a big business and you're growing whatever else, you develop an unhealthy ego. And sometimes that unhealthy ego contributes to this crap.
Right.
It
It's also
does.
like goes the highest. What's the highest concentration of people watching porn? Typically in the Bible Belt, because it's repressed. Whenever they repress a need,
Yeah.
a human urge,
Bingo.
right, it
Bingo.
pops out anyway in
Yeah.
secret ways. So, but I
Yep.
mean, so I think that. So what? So what happened is somehow the movie got hijacked in a sense that into the political landscape, right? That it's this sort of part of a right wing conspiracy. And why do you think that is? So what do
Well,
you
I'll
think
tell you
caused that
why.
to happen?
I'll tell you, it's because Jim Caviezel is very, very, very openly right wing, right? He spoke at a QAnon rally. After we filmed the movie, he spoke at a rally. Now, I've spent time with Jim. I like Jim. You know, we spent a bunch of time together while we were in Colombia. You know, I tell people Jesus told me to buy a Harley, because I'm sitting there at dinner, just me and Jim, and you know, and he played Jesus, Passion of the Christ, right? He's going through these pictures. He's like, oh, this is the most amazing Harley I've ever seen. He goes, now, Paul, you have a Harley, right? I'm like, no, I don't. He goes in his Jesus voice, you have to buy this Harley, right? So anyway, I bought it sight unseen right there on the spot, called the dealership, gave him my Amex, and done. But so Jim's a good guy, but he is not shy about his political and religious beliefs. And in doing so, I think that there was a lot of tie-in with some of his interviews and what's going on with the movie.
Well, maybe I thought I watched it with my wife last night. We both thought maybe we missed it, but I didn't remember seeing any references to adrenochrome or anything like that.
There's
Why?
nothing.
What? But it's in it. It's so odd that like that's somehow the narrative that's out there in the press, that the movie focuses on that, and
Yeah.
so it's just complete fiction.
Yeah, that's all crap. That's all. It's the media trying to throw this whole movement with the movie under the bus with the adrenochrome movement, and you know, these conspiracy things that are out there. I mean, here's the thing. This is what makes me mad. You don't have to go all the way to the eating babies and adrenochrome to have it be bad. An 11-year-old's being sold to me for sex is bad enough, right? What I have seen in 70 undercover rescue missions in 15 countries, what I have seen every single time with children being sold to adults for sex anywhere in the world, no matter what color, that's bad enough, period. Right?
So
So we don't
essentially, it's
have to
not some
go.
massive conspiracy; it's just the world's oldest profession, basically.
It is. But when you're dealing with children, and when you're dealing with control, when you're dealing with manipulation, when you're dealing with trafficking, that's wrong. It's crossing all the lines right there.
Of course, right.
Yeah.
Of course. So let's go back a step. So how did you tell me your background? You know, I know you made a lot of money in Wall Street finance and real estate, right? You had a hedge fund. But so you can't, so at what point do you get out of that? How do you go from there to this place where you are right now? So how did that happen?
I was still in the fund. In fact, we had now we're at 48 billion in assets under management. And Bridge Investment Group is the fund that I co-founded with John Pennington and some others. We had a few billion under management. We were doing really, really well. I get a phone call from our attorney general, said, Paul, I need to introduce you to a Homeland Security agent. He's got some kids, and he tells me this whole story. Now at the time,
that was the Jim Caviezel character.
Yeah, Jim Caviezel was the character. Yeah, so he brings him to this movie night. I mean, my friend just sold his company for $1.8 billion and built this badass theater, right? And we're having this guy's movie night, and the attorney general says, hey, I want to bring this Homeland Security agent to pitch this idea. And I'm like, hell no. I don't want you pitching an idea to my brothers. You know, we're here just having a good time. He says, this is different. I have to come. So he convinced me to bring him. He brings him to this thing. He stands up on the stage at the end of this freaking gorgeous home theater, right? And presents this thing. And I get sick to my stomach. I'm like, holy hell. You know, I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors. $10,000 with Make-A-Wish, I could send a little girl to Disneyland for a week, which is important. She's struggling with cancer, right? 50,000 here, we could pull 20 children out of hell and get them back to their families, right? I'm like, well, let's make this happen, guys. Let's, you know. And so then he calls me a few weeks later, the Homeland Security agent.
What year is this now? This is 2000.
This is exactly 10 years ago, 2014, actually,
okay.
About nine and a half years ago, right? And he said, Paul, I'm in Cartagena. There's not just 20 children. There's more than 50 here. There's more than 100 children in the surrounding areas. He said, I have a plan. I think we can rescue all 100 children at the same time, but I need your help, even bigger. I'm like, well, how much do you need? I thought he needed a bigger check. He said, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said, the head trafficker's got this piece of property, explain this whole deal. And he said, how you fit in is this. You fly down here, you tell him, listen, I'll fund your deal under one condition. You bring all these children for a party. If I like what you provide with your inventory, I'll fund your deal. We'll make this happen, right? So 2 days later, now in the movie, my character, I gave up some resistance. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. And the only thing that convinced me is he had given me a picture of this little 11-year-old girl. In reality, I was already there. I was in front of the traffickers when one of the traffickers leans forward and he said, Pablo, I have a gift for you. And he hands me his phone and there's a picture of this child on his phone. And he says, this is Princess. She's still a virgin. And start talking about these horrible things. And I thought, you know what? This is really fucking happening. I can't even believe that this guy is selling me this child. And he's talking about all these other things. And so 2 weeks later, we go back in. We have the Colombian federal agents provide 40 agents for us. 4 of them are like our waiters and our maids and our cooks. And they're not very good cooks, but they're armed, right? And 25 are there to storm the party at the right time. And these guys showed up in Cartagena with 54 children. Almost every one of them were under the age of 16. More than half of them were kidnapped from other places, other countries, some of them. And I'm sitting there and they parade these children. They bring out these 4 virgins, scared to death. One of them was a little boy. He was 11 years old. They brought him in, I believe, from Haiti. They gave him cocaine that morning. And this little 11-year-old that was shaking this other little girl, they showed me a picture. And I'm like, fuck this. When I was done, I'm like, you know what? That was the darkest thing I've ever seen. The darkest thing I've ever seen. And we could hear the children laughing and singing in there. And I started crying. That sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. And I turned to the attorney general and the operator that was with me. And I said, I've spent my whole life making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. What do you need? And he answered me. He said, Paul, here's the problem. The big part of the demand for these parties like this that happen every weekend in these different cities come from wealthy, connected guys with big egos like you. He says, I'm sorry to say, but he says, it's the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world. That's just kind of what's doing this. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch and a $4,000 suit and negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. He said, and I don't know of any ultra successful business owners who've had the training that you've had.
Did you have training, military training and so forth?
Well, are you familiar with Krav Maga?
Yes.
So yeah, for the listeners who don't know, regular, martial arts, bow to your sensei, 3 points when you kick them in the leg. Krav is brick to their head, go home to your family. It's Israeli special forces. You every move, they don't talk, they don't see, they don't walk. I can take away a gun faster than they can pull the trigger every single time, right? So that combined with some other things that I was with the attorney general a year before in a meeting with a CIA recruiter who's basically, he called me a good liar, right? He said, Paul, he says, I've been watching you for 3 days. I think your country could use your talents. And I'm like, well, what talents are those? He said, I saw you in seconds break down the barrier of communication with a billionaire, a runway model, a bum on the street. He said, we look for years to find somebody with that skill set. He said, we'll fly you to Dubai, line you up with some dirty money guys. I turned him down. I didn't want to put my life in danger for some dirty money guys in Dubai or whatever else. A year later, when the attorney general was meeting with the Homeland Security, he said, listen, I've got a guy who can handle himself in a dangerous situation, but these guys were trying to recruit him because he can manipulate, he can talk well, and he can deal with those things. He can think on his feet. And so those combined with the fact that I had $50,000 watches and I had the freaking ego at the time, right? That I was like, I'm Paul effing Hutchinson. And so they were able to bring me into multiple sting operations in lots of cities. I set up a fake profile. I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I'm Paul Stone. I don't live in Utah. I live in Southern California. I have fake web pages, everything. And they were able to show that profile in every city that they went and bring together all the traffickers that were selling children for a party for this wacko.
Jesus. So they brought these kids out. How close was it to the movement? So the kids came out and then basically the Colombian agents stormed the party. And
here's something that wasn't in the movie so we did put in the movie that the tension of them not coming. In real life, all 54 kids were brought in 2 boats the very first minute. However, we're sitting at this table. We have undercover cameras so that we can gather everything. We put the kids in a separate place in the house. So we don't want them getting traumatized. And we have this negotiation meeting with the traffickers. We need to get them to say exactly why the kids are there, what they're willing to do, how old they are, what all of this stuff. So the kids never have to stand trial, right? So we've got this conversation going with these guys. And once we have all that information, we order tequila. And once we do that, our waiters go in, they radio the guys, boom, and they were supposed to show up within 2 or 3 minutes. They were going to storm the party, arrest everybody, and everything's good. Well, Jordan, we ordered tequila. Time to go, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20. It was 45 minutes later before the agents actually stormed the party. The problem is now it was time, we ordered tequila. It's time to start the party. The reason for the delay, there was some lady who was part of the Child Protective Services that slept through her alarm, that missed the boat coming out to the island. And she says, you can't do this thing without me. And so they had to freaking delay. We didn't know this, right? We're sitting there and the traffickers stand up. One says, okay, I'll go get that. Here's the cocaine. He starts taking the cocaine out. The other ones go get the kids and bring them out for the sex party. We're like, wow, that doesn't happen. Now, this part right here, yes, I was Paul F. and Hutchinson, but I'm just going to go with it now. It's a damn good thing I was there. Why? Because I had negotiated hundreds of business contracts, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, guys. You know what? You bring in that cocaine, you bring out the kids, I'm going to be effed up for the next few days. You've just proven to me that you could provide what you said you could provide. So why don't we do this? Bring me out a pen and a notebook. I want to pencil this deal right here, right? So I want you to show me, tell me what this resort's going to look like. Boom, we draw it all out. No agents are coming. I'm like, God damn, where are they? Then I'm like, okay, let's talk about the commodities. Where are you getting them? Now, this is where it got dark, right? I'm like, so how much? How much does it cost you to bring in a little Colombian girl? $2,500. Okay, what about a little blonde American, the 11-year-old? Whatever, $25,000. Okay, so I'm writing these numbers down, asking them how they're getting these kids. I mean, when you're doing a business plan, you're wondering, okay, what is the cost of goods sold and everything else? When the goods are children, it gets dark, right? And the darkest part of this conversation, I don't know if you want me to go there, but it shook me to the core.
No, don't go there. I don't want to hear it. What was the darkest
all right,
part?
Here's what it is. Darkest part was this. I'm like, okay, now you guys are charging me between $2,000 and $5,000 for those virgins that are in there, right? Are you guys just ripping me off, or is that really what you charge? And they're like, yeah, that's what we charge. So I'm writing them down. So I'm doing this calculation of cash flow on this thing. And then I said, okay, after you rent them out as a virgin, then what does it cost? What is their price drop to the next time? Does it automatically drop to 500 each time? Whatever it is. And that female trafficker, she goes, oh no, we can rent them out as a virgin more than once. I'm like, what? What do you mean? She says, we rent them out for $2,000 to $5,000, but it only costs $200 to sew back their hymen. I was like, what is happening? Where we're treating these children with that kind of disregard for everything. I mean, it just made me, I was so sickened by that conversation, so sickened. Now I had to change the subject from there. I'm like, okay. I said, okay. I said, now let's talk about you. I turned to her. I says, let's fund your modeling agency. What's that going to cost to put that together? And the agent still hadn't come. It was 30 minutes, right? I'm bullshitting this whole time. And then I'm like, you know what, guys? I like this. I'm in. I take 55% of anything I'm doing. I'm going to be in control. You guys get 45. And I pointed at one of the traffickers. I said, I think you've done most of the work. You should have about 30% of that. The rest of you guys split 50. You know what? Why don't you guys figure that out? And boom, they started just arguing with each other, like ruthlessly arguing between the traffickers about who was going to get a bigger percentage of the company that I was investing in. And they argued for another 15 minutes until the agents came and stormed the party, and boom, we all got thrown on the ground.
What happens to these people, to these men and women who are engaged in trafficking? Do they do life sentences? Do they get killed in jail? Do they ever get out to see the light of day? Or what's the story with that?
Well, the goal would be life sentences and never see the light of day. I will say this, on all the rescues I've done in the last 10 years, 4 traffickers have been killed. Most of them from each other, though, right? They were turf war things, arguing about who was going to bring the children for our party. Great. You guys, that's great. One less person to have to deal with. However,
Right.
and most of them will go in and we're not just Rambos. We don't just go in and say, oh, we're going to be here. We go in first. Our team meets with the president, the top federal agents, et cetera. And we say, listen, we're going to do all the work. We're going to pay for everything. And we're going to give you all the credit. Your people are going to think you're heroes. You're going to arrest us, and everybody's going to think that we got extradited to the U.S. to stand trial, right? All we ask is that the bad guys stay in jail for good. They don't get around your system. And number two, we have full access to the kids and getting them rehabilitated and back to their families. And so that's happened on most of them where they've stayed in. In fact, we'll have them have life in prison. We'll let them plea down to 25 years in exchange for them giving lists of the U.S. Johns that have been down there. If they have contact information of guys that then we can go in and take down the U.S., the pedophiles themselves, the demand side, then we'll, even 25 years though down there, realize this, here in the U.S., we have to separate the pedophiles from the bank robbers and the murderers because they'll take them out. There's a pecking order. They're like, listen, you know what? Yeah, I killed that guy because he was an ass. I'm going to kill you too because you're effing kids, right? And so down in Latin America, they don't separate them. They get taken care of in the right way. And when they're put away down there, which is really good.
Nothing wrong with that,
Yeah, absolutely. And now there have been a few situations in Haiti and even in Colombia where those ones that were part of that first sting down there, the system over time, they let them out and then they have to rearrest them. And I believe that they're out right now, which just makes you sick. They're like, these guys are just, trying to make some money in their business selling these kids. The real bad guys are the ones that are the Americans that are coming down here and effing the kids, right? Which, yeah, they're actually right. It's on both sides.
And on the demand side, I guess the equivalent would be like there's the drug traffickers and there's the drug addicts, right? Although, you certainly have some sympathy for drug addicts, while you can't have any sympathy for child molesters and pedophiles, right? So, what's the is there a certain, like you mentioned, big ego, but I would have to believe it's more than that.
There's a lot more. Here's where I've spent a lot of time on figuring out where the hell this is coming from.
Because it doesn't make sense. Like, I guess you watch, you're like, how is this? I don't understand the attraction. I don't understand.
Here's what happens, right? So you, me, everybody who's watching this has seen pornography. Just because you look at pornography doesn't mean you're going to become a pedophile. However, there's a certain demographic that get hardcore addicted. They don't have anything else going on. There's some other factors that we'll talk about in a second that contribute to it, that when they get addicted, they need something harder to have that same fix. And for some of them, harder is, more grotesque videos. There's bondage, there's rape videos. For some of them, harder is a little bit younger, a little bit younger, a little bit younger. And pretty soon they're fantasizing about something they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies. And that's creating a demand. But then I thought for a while, okay, let's if you think of the rings in a chain, right? And if you can break that chain, then you don't get to the end. The very end of that chain is the abuse of a child. So just rescuing the kids, just shutting down the traffickers, that's that second to last ring. Somehow we need to get all the way back here to these other rings. And yes, child pornography is a ring that's leading to the actual contact of an offender. However, even that is a symptom of something more. Here's something that's amazing. 1 out of every 4 women listening to us today have been a victim of sexual violence as a child, most of them in their own homes. Okay. Now, with men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in 5, 20% at some time in their life have been a victim. But even them, literally 1/4 of them, 200 million men in this world, it happened under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. So there's a massive, massive number of child trauma, not only sexual trauma, but physical abuse and others is even a bigger number, massive, massive number that's never talked about. And what happens is this: 2/3 of them, God bless them, they grow up to say, you know what? I'm not letting that affect a child ever. I'm going to use that as a motivation to be a protector in every way. There are others, 1/3, that become contact offenders themselves and pass on that trauma to children later on in life. And so here's something that kind of pisses some people off. People say, Paul, how can you go face to face with somebody selling you a child and have them not see the anger and hatred in your eyes? And my answer surprises them. There's a part of me that has some compassion. Well, how can you have compassion? They're selling you an 8-year-old. No, realize this. I will do everything in my power to ensure they never, ever touch another child again. But what I wish more than anything is that I had a time machine. And I can go back 5 years or 10 years, whenever it was, before they ever passed that trauma on to a child, and figured out what in the world was going on in their life. Most of them were raped themselves. Most of them had 1,000 bad things that happened to them and 1,000 bad decisions that they made. There's no excuse of the bad things that happened to you, right? 1,000 bad decisions they made that got them to the point where they thought that that was okay to sell a child. But what if? Now, we don't have a time machine. We can't take it back. But what we do have is hundreds of millions of people who have dealt with challenges as a child, who have dealt with all kinds of issues, that are starting to get addicted to things, whatever it is, that if we can love them and help them at that stage and say, okay, what do we need to do to course correct and give you the tools that you need to shed that trauma and realize that that doesn't define you. It doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life. Whatever happened to you as a child, you can turn it around. Then we could save millions of children. That's what liberating humanity is all about. My goal for a long time was just eradicating trafficking. My everything on my social media, everything now is all liberating humanity, because that's what it's about. We have to liberate all of us. We've got to liberate us from our unhealthy addictions, that are, especially if they're causing harm in other people in any way, right? We have to liberate ourselves from whatever crap happened to us when we were children that we can shed and get rid of. Whatever it is, we can change our thoughts. We can change our entire directive of our life where we never hurt a child. So that's kind of my goal moving forward. People say, where are you putting all your money now? What you're putting your resources? Boom, 100% of it is in liberating humanity, as well as eradicating trafficking with the Child Liberation Foundation.
Wow. So the people who you have arrested along the way, right? So they're either in jail. The vast majority of them are going to die in jail. A few, though, do get out.
Yeah. There's that. Go ahead.
Keep going. And what about the children? You said that you make it a point that you can help, so take charge of rehabilitating. And that was one of the things that we both, my wife and I, were focusing. Like, wow, like just imagine the damage. The child. Rosia goes back to her family. With the little boy, and what was the little boy's name in the movie?
They called him Teddy.
Teddy. Yeah.
Miguel was his real name. Yeah.
Like, how does that child ever recover from this type of experience?
Here's what's amazing, Jordan. Children
are resilient, no doubt.
They're super resilient, and especially if at that young age you can talk through it and put them into a healthy environment and a healthy family. It's amazing to me how many of them are able to work through it. If you can get them, you don't want to take them out of hell and put them into another hell, right? Putting into a foster program, an orphanage that is super unhealthy, that doesn't work. But through our foundation, we partner with a lot of NGOs that are doing it right. We've been studying this for a long time. One of my favorites is out of Guatemala. This group has a program where they bring poor families, a husband, a father, and a child who can't afford their mortgage. And they say, listen, we're going to bring you onto this farm ranch area. You'll have a job, and we're going to give you 3 more kids. Right. And we have therapists and psychiatrists, whatever, but they're bringing these children that don't have families into healthy environments so that they can prosper and grow. If the parents were involved, like in Southeast Asia and Thailand, more than half the children that we rescued in Thailand were sold by their own families. You can't put them back into that situation; they'll be sold again, right? So you have to find a healthy home, and we have a project right now called Liberating Wings. And that it's a healing wings. It's a physical wing that we're putting on all of the safe houses that's specifically focused on healing tools, on everything from meditation to art therapy to a lot of different things that can help clear the mind and clear the trauma that we've worked on for a long time. Now, I will say this, the women and men who are listening to this right now, who had some challenges as a child, big challenges. They were raped as a child, right? The average age of somebody who comes out and talks about that is 52 years old. The majority of people hold on to it their entire life. And that's where it becomes super damaging, because when you're burying that subconsciously, it comes out in erratic behaviors and in very unsound sexual behaviors that go down dark roads like pedophilia, etc. It comes out in anger and physical abuse and these things. And some of them don't even know where it's coming from because they've buried it for so long.
Right.
And so we can help them. We have some amazing tools. I have some healing retreats in Latin America that we take them down for a 4 or 5 day, fully immersive transformational healing experience that I can get 20 years worth of therapy done in 3 or 4 days using some plant medicine tools and things like that
Right.
I'm working to change
Probably
the
like
laws here in the
ibogaine
US.
would be pretty helpful for something like that as well. You know,
exactly.
it's been PTSD. Ibogaine is really helpful. I was thinking about that. You know,
huge, absolutely. Yeah, we do ayahuasca ceremonies and psilocybin. We're changing the laws in a lot of states on those because there's so much evidence of being able to use that to release that kind of trauma in 24 to 48 hours. Johns Hopkins University has done massive studies on all this crap. All this, it all got thrown under the bus in the late 60s. And our entire life, we've been told that it's as dangerous as cocaine. It's not.
It's not.
It's as dangerous as it's as dangerous as table sugar.
No, I know.
If
it's
you
crazy.
right,
I know.
it can transform things. So
no doubt about it.
That's from a healing standpoint.
I grew up in that era where
like
it's like, one hit of LSD, you'll be on a bad trip, you'll jump out a window and be fucked up forever, basically, right? And it turns out that things like, I mean, I went through ibogaine and it really helped me tremendously. And I know many people that have cured a heroin addiction and PTSD. So that's very, very interesting. So you're using that in terms of helping children overcome these sort of traumas and whatnot.
That's what we use helping the adults who have dealt with childhood trauma. We're not using, we have other modalities that are not using the
right. I guess it'd be different on a child.
Yeah. But we can still, we have some different modalities that we can put them into that same level of trauma therapy using sound bowl and frequency variation type stuff to put them into that same kind of a psychedelic trance without the help of plant medicine. So yeah, a lot of tools that we're using to fix that.
So getting back to the success of the movie, one of the things I noticed when the movie first came out, and it was that period of 30 days, it was like all over social media. People were sharing it, their experiences, promoting it. How much of that was organic, and how much was a direct response of the message at the end of the movie? You think that was actually really helpful, and that was what was driving it?
I think it was super helpful, but it was interesting, the grassroots movement that came from using Angel Studios instead of a traditional distributor. So these other traditional distributors, they would put $20-30 million into a whole bunch of pre-advertising and all of this stuff. Angel Studios is a whole different animal. They brought the Jesus TV series called The Chosen, whatever else, but they've got this huge group, and that may have been one of the reasons, back to our first question of why people are throwing it under a political bus and whatnot. Angel was never supposed to be political, but they are very, very much Christian in the movies and things that they put out. And so maybe a lot of people threw that under that bus because it was being distributed by a Christian movement, whatever. But there was a massive movement from the supporters of Angel Studios. Lots of people who just say, hey, I want to help. And before they ever even saw the film, there was all kinds of stuff all over social media.
So the movie ultimately said it's done 107. Is it still in theaters right now?
Still in theaters. Yep. We're over 170 million right now in box office, which is massive. We're a 14
what was the budget? What was the
film.
budget on that? If it 14 million?
14.5. Yeah. Yeah. We were actually 13.5 million, but then we have to raise some more to help buy out the Fox Disney thing or whatever else. But yeah, totally. And we're at 14.5.
And when do you plan to launch in, Latin America and other places in the world?
Well, we'll be in most of Latin America on August 31st. So we're about 2 weeks away from being all over Latin America right now when we're filming this. And then other places in the world, it'll be after that. So, and then later it'll be out on Angel's platform, which is something you pay it forward, et cetera. So it'll be everywhere.
Will it ever be? Do you see this going on Apple, or no? You don't ever see this being on Apple TV?
I don't know. I'm not sure what the guys at Angel are figuring all of that out and deciding what they want to do with it. I'm at this point, I'm the first investor and played in the movie. There's guys way smarter than me that are figuring out how to take this out to the world.
So what's your plan from this point forward? So you have this huge success under your belt. You're just gonna do more of the same. You have a vision in mind of where you see this in 5 years.
I do. We have some of the guys that want to do a Sound of Freedom 2. I'm not involved in that at all. That's more the Homeland Security agent wants to do some stuff. That was my first, and for the next 10 years, that's the life that I lived in all those other rescue missions. So there's a lot of people that are coming to me saying, Paul, I want to do a series. I want to do what can we do with all of this massive amounts of material from all these other rescue missions that you've been on? My goal, is the same goal that I made 10 years ago, sitting in front of that 11-year-old child. I'm going to eradicate this from the face of the earth, period. And I believe we can do that, but it takes a lot bigger picture. It takes changing this generational trauma. It's not just rescuing that 10-year-old there. It's rescuing the 10-year-old in your neighbor's house that's being abused by her uncle, right? That's all stuff that we can change by changing that, by fixing that generational passing on of that trauma year after year after year.
Yeah.
So
well, I gotta say,
I mean,
it's there's really, it's the only sad thing is that this somehow got politically polarizing, which is just so ridiculous. It just really is very sad. But I have to say that, after watching the movie and just talking to you, I mean, it's just really, it's a noblest of pursuits. And I think that you've already made, obviously massive impact, but I think that my money's on you. So, and I think eradicating it's going to be difficult because, but certainly putting
I'm going to make a huge impact. You watch.
Huge impact.
Is that going to be possible? Yeah, I'm Paul F. and Hutchinson. I can do this. You watch it.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for it took a while for you to get on the podcast here, but I really appreciate you coming on. And I'd love to have you on again at some point and follow up and see what's going on.
I would love to. In fact, next time I'm in Florida, I'm in Florida a lot. We're trying to actually have this in person, but I'd love to just catch up and then maybe have our next one where we can just sit.
Let's do it for sure.
Sit together and shoot the shit. So it'd be good.
Paul, thank you so much for coming on, buddy.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate you, bud.
Bye-bye.
Bye.